Moonstone. She looks like a nice lady, right? No, she's one of the most evil people I've ever read about in Marvel. Today, you're going to find out why, because we're going over some lore of the latest card to release in Marvel Snap, Moonstone, and then we're going to review the card in this installment of
Is it worth it?
What's going on, nerds? So, Carla Sofin, that's Moonstone's real name. Excuse me, Dr. Carla Sofin. She's a psychiatrist. And the main reason why I think and say she's so evil is because she was cruel and manipulative to her patients, and for some reason, that is way more vile than like Thanos trying to kill half the universe. You get that to an extent. You're like, yeah, sure, I guess. It's weird logic, but okay, Thanos, we get it. But this lady, nah, she was just a bitch. Some examples of her shadiness. One of her patients was going to leave therapy. This lady, Carla, Dr. Sofin, didn't want her to leave therapy, so she posed as the patient's husband's mistress and called their house repeatedly to basically fuck with this lady and drive her crazy. That's cool. Another one, she would just scream, "You're crazy," at this lady who had anger and mental issues. The person would start whining about their problems, and Dr. Carla Sofin would just get up and scream, "You're crazy," at her. What the fuck? As a result, 8 of her patients unalived themselves, unfortunately, and a bunch of others got basically sent to full-time mental institutions. Yeah, the lady's a fucking psychopath. So, Carla Dr. Sofin doesn't like her patients, clearly. She also doesn't like depending on them financially to make a living. So, she figures out a weird plan. She basically finds the original Moonstone, a guy named Lloyd Bach. He's a criminal. He's a superpowered criminal, but he's just a criminal. He's not like Dr. Doom or anything at this point. Dr. Carla Sofin goes and convinces this dude that he needs therapy, which he probably does, but not from this fucking lady. Over the course of their sessions, she slowly drugs him, makes him hallucinate, and long story short, convinces Lloyd to give up the Moonstone. It's a shard. A moon gem is a shard from the Kree Tree of Life. It gives people powers. So Lloyd gives it up. Dr. Carla Sofin is now a superpowered sociopath. Yay. So she does so much damage that Baron Zemo takes notice. He's like, "Damn, lady, you were fucked up. You want to join my team?" And then Dr. Carla Sofin's like, "Yeah." Baron Zemo names this group of psychos the Masters of Evil. Really? The Masters of Evil? It's a little on the nose there, Baron Zemo. You're smarter than that. Anyways, the Masters of Evil in the comic books clash with the Avengers numerous times over the course of their history, and how it relates to the story that's being told in the current season of Marvel Snap is Hammer basically takes over what S.H.I.E.L.D. was, Norman Osborn takes over Hammer, and the Avengers go missing, and Norman basically substitutes his own evil Avengers, the Thunderbolts. Now you got a bunch of psychos in different colored outfits. They had to change they changed outfits because they didn't want anyone to be like, "Hey, weren't you that fucking absolutely awful psychiatrist lady that was also a super villain?" She's like, "No, I'm wearing red now. I'm a good guy." Let's review the card. Moonstone is a 4 energy, 6 power card that reads ongoing. Has the ongoing effects of your 1, 2, and 3 cost cards here. Overall impressions of Moonstone. This card's kind of sick. I'm not gonna lie, I'm excited for it. Ongoing definitely needed a card like this to put it over the top, or at least to nudge it into the this might be good enough to be competitive at the top ranks of ladder category. And copying ongoing effects is sick as fuck. There's a reason ongoing effects have small power usually, because the ongoing part of them is a powerful ability. It'll be limited in its use, but I'm just not really seeing, or I'm refusing to see, how this card isn't going to be super duper good, at least in one deck. All right, onto the good and bad of Moonstone. Pros, cons. First thing, powerful synergies. The only cards that aren't good with Moonstone are Lizard and Ebony Maw. The rest of all the other ongoings are either just duplications like Goose and Luke Cage, or they're just good. Even the weaker ones like Mojo would still be great if you're playing it in like Jean Grey deck. Usually those ongoing decks are playing Jean Grey. Mojo's going to be fantastic on Moonstone. So yeah, when cards have lower power like Moonstone, it's a 6 power 4 drop, they have to have good abilities, and I think this one's pretty good. They also have to have good synergies, which this one also has. Point 2, ongoing cards have a small base power for a reason. This sort of relates to point 1. Ongoing cards like Iron Man is the most obvious example, has 0 power because its ongoing ability is so powerful. Every ongoing card in the game has worse power than you would expect the card to have at whatever cost. I think the highest one is what, like Ajax maybe? I think Ajax is probably the most base power you get. My point is they're for a reason, because ongoing abilities are usually pretty strong. And when you alter their base power at all, they're quite good. That's why Spectrum's good. Spectrum's good because it's giving plus base power to all your ongoing cards. And finally, how all this wraps up with Moonstone is all the 1, 2, and 3 cost ongoing cards have nowhere near 6 power as their base power. What's the highest one? Like Jean Grey, but that one doesn't really matter here. I think it's Punisher and Captain America have the most power at 3, because if you were to make those any bigger with the ongoings that they have, they would be really, 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 really good cards. Last point here, it might be the final puzzle piece to make ongoing decks really competitive at the top of the ladder. We've seen this ongoing Jean Grey with like Man-Thing and US Agent. We've seen those be pretty decent, quite competitive in the past few months. They've been shifting in and out of the meta depending on what the meta is, but they're good. I think you can play an ongoing deck all the way to like the top 1000 very easily without having to worry much. And with Moonstone coming out, those decks are strictly way better. All right, onto the bad, narrow deck usage. Now, I could obviously be wrong here. I'm sure there's plenty of deck builders out there who are already thinking of ways to play this in not an ongoing shell. Maybe. I'm not really seeing it, but I think for the most part, this deck is just going to end up being like, you put this in the Spectrum ongoing stuff, and that's it. And that's definitely a downside, because a card that costs 6k tokens, or you have to spend 4 keys on, that you're only going to ever play in one archetype, is a bit of a bummer. The cards in the past we've seen that span multiple archetypes that become like prevalent in a lot of decks in the meta that are worth 6k tokens are not like Moonstone. Maybe they're not as strong as Moonstone on just like a strict power level, but they're way more flexible. All right, and the second point here, it's a giant tech target. I usually don't like saying this about cards. In Magic the Gathering, we had this phrase called dies to Doomblade. So anytime a creature, no matter how good the creature would come out during preview season, people would be like, well, it dies to Doomblade, so it's not that great. It's a terrible argument. But when the argument is sort of valid is when you have to invest a lot of resources or your whole strategy revolves around this one thing and it gets nullified like super easily. That is a pretty big bummer and an actual downside. Moonstone is almost to that level, I think. Rogue also not only takes away one of the ongoing abilities from you, it also takes it away from Moonstone. So that's like a double whammy of tech getting screwed by tech. But yeah, in general, like 10 power cards, the card that comes out that's 10 power, they'll be like, oh, it's okay. You can Shang-Chi it, so it's not that big of a deal. Terrible arguments. But here the tech does more than just nullify the singular card. It really hampers your entire deck, in my opinion. If you can think any other downsides, pros, cons, good, bad, leave them in the comments section below. All right, onto the example deck list. Pretty straightforward. It's the same deck I've been referring to this whole time. The only downside of this particular version of the ongoing Spectrum decks is its reliance on Luke Cage to not screw yourself over with Man-Thing and US Agent. I always didn't like that. I generally try to stay away from this sort of scenario where it's like, if you don't have this one card, this would kind of really suck. Linchpin cards, basically. So I can see another version of this deck being better that just doesn't use US Agent and Man-Thing. Maybe you do Speed and Iron Lad, or just some of the other ongoing effects instead. But for an example deck list, I just use the stock standard. This is what's been good in the past. It's probably going to be good with Moonstone going forward. All right, on to my recommendation on whether or not you should spend resources on Moonstone. So as far as tokens go, I would say if you for sure know you're going to play the ongoing Spectrum deck a lot, it actually might be worth it. Don't spend the tokens on the fact that like you would only play that deck because it's the best deck. Don't do that. Save your tokens in that case, wait a day or two and see if the deck is actually going to be a top meta deck before you spend your resources. But there are plenty of people who like to play particular archetypes. Like me, I like discard just whenever I don't want to think about anything, and whenever I'm just sick of trying out new decks and doing shit like that. I just play a discard deck. I'm like, you know what, screw it. I don't want to think too much today. Just play Dracula discard. We're good to go. It wins, it's solid, and it's just my default. If ongoing decks is that for you, then I think Moonstone is a great pickup for 6k tokens. It's a lot. 6k tokens is a lot, but like I said, if discard to me, if ongoing is that to you, I think Moonstone is going to be just as crucial to ongoing decks going forward as Dracula is to discard decks. Now onto keys, using keys to open up them caches. This is a weird week. It's a little weak of a week too. So Black Swan is a staple of bounce, and it would be good to pick up Black Swan. There's a couple of different decks that use that card happily, but they're not really prevalent in the meta right now. So if you don't have Black Swan, I don't think you're really missing out on much. Even then, if you want to play bounce and you don't have Black Swan, I think there's plenty of ways to play bounce without Black Swan that are totally fine, and in my personal opinion, better than the Black Swan type bounce decks. So yeah, that's sort of it's a whatever card. And then as far as Nocturne goes, that card just doesn't cut it anymore. It used to be good at 5 power, but now at 4 power, there's just too many better options. There's too many different utility cards that are just better than Nocturne. So it's also like, it's worse than Black Swan. So yeah, I don't think Nocturne should factor into your opinion whatsoever if you don't have it. With keys, if you're missing both Black Swan and Nocturne, and you want Moonstone, then yeah, absolutely go for it. But if you have both of those cards, or even if you have one of those other 2 cards, not sure spending 4 keys is good, unless, of course, you are an ongoing player. Then it is. All right, that's the review. Thank you for watching. Bye.